It's a great pleasure for me to be here. This is my first time in Sydney, and I'm very impressed by this audience and what I've heard so far. And thank you very much for bringing me here. I am currently based in Africa. I live in Dakar, Senegal, West Africa, where I am conducting the UNDP work to provide policy, technical, and financial support to countries in Africa on climate change mitigation. I focus my work on mitigation because even if the demand in Africa, in many countries, is not on mitigation, it's on adaptation to climate change, we believe that there is still a very important role to be played by mitigation. So to understand mitigation, I wish everyone could understand this bathtub illustration. Above our head, there is this layer of greenhouse gas emission, and we have to compare this layer that's getting thicker and thicker to this bathtub that we fill in with greenhouse gas emission. This is a wide open tap on top, and filling in this tub. And yes, there is an evacuation. You know, there is some sinks and sequestration. But the problem today is that the tap is wide open, while the evacuation is much less. And as a consequence, every year, every day that goes, this bath is being filled in a little bit, and this provokes climate change. And today, this is the latest data that we have. We have reached last year 394 ppm. And some of us know that we may have passed this 350 ppm threshold, above which, you know, things are becoming more and more complex, and this is what we experience. You know, the impact of climate change is real today. The problem is that we don't have only one big tap. We have as many taps as we have countries, and have many taps as we have individuals on planet Earth. And some of the taps are bigger than others. And this is an additional difficulty. There is an agreement. There is an agreement that we have to do our best so that this tap being filled up with greenhouse gas emission has not to exceed 450 ppm in order to limit, you know, the increase in temperature to a lower 2 degrees Celsius. And when we look at that, and when we look at the number, the tap is open to that up to 32 gigaton of greenhouse gas emission per year. The sink and sequestration potential is only 15. So the only way, and I wish policymakers and energy ministers and environmental ministers could understand that, the only way to stabilize greenhouse gas emission is to reduce the tap at the level of the sink. We do have a possibility to increase the sink a little bit by stopping deforestation, by planting trees and so on. Yes, but still, you see, the margin that we have is we have no choice but to reduce by half the global greenhouse gas emission everywhere. There are 4 steps to move the current trend in greenhouse gas emission to a low carbon path. And the first step is we have to change behavior. We have to change the way we use the energy system. Every single energy system, a car, a light, a TV, a building, an industry that we use, by just changing some behavior, we can reduce the greenhouse gas emission. At the second level comes energy efficiency. And I make a difference between energy efficiency and the change of behavior. And the combination of the two is what we call energy conservation. The third step is renewable energy. And this is, of course, in everyone's mind, but we have to not only do renewable energy, we also have to go through this energy conservation step. And the last bit is enhancing sequestration through stopping deforestation and planting trees. Climate change is simple, you know. We just have to move away from fossil fuel everywhere in the world, and we have to plant trees wherever possible. It's as simple as that. There is a tendency in this world to make things more complex than they are, and we believe we are smart because we think we elaborate some very important scheme like carbon finance and so on, and there is not enough understanding of what climate change is about and what it takes to address it. I belong in Europe to a think tank called the Negawatt Company, the Negawatt Institute, where we have, in fact, put some numbers behind each of those steps. And the most difficult part is definitely the change of behavior. It accounts for 10 to 15%. This is where we need to accept in a change of behavior that the price of energy will go up whether we like it or not. And we need a high price of energy to avoid the rebound effect. We also accept that energy efficiency is not enough. And I don't have time to show you, but there is a way to indeed put some numbers for each of those steps. But change behavior goes beyond just the way we manipulate and handle the energy system around us. Change of behavior, we have to accept. We have to believe what we know. And the point in climate change, we don't believe what we know. This bathtub is getting more and more filled, and we don't accept that. And we think that we accept that the human life is at risk, but we don't accept to change the fundamental driver of the way the society is being developed, this market-based economy. We accept the fact that we may lose, yes, some ground, we may lose some population, but we don't accept the change. So this is why change of behavior. We have to accept also the size of the effort that we need to address. Going for energy efficiency is good, but adding 10% or going for an option for 10% reduction of 25%, no. We have to do both. We have to combine. And it's a combination of the two that will take us to where we need to go. And by the way, this is where we need to go. You certainly know this equation, this beautiful equation from Professor Kaya in Japan, where greenhouse gas emission is a multiplication, it's a product of the carbon content of energy, the energy productivity. This is from Kateri's message yesterday. I don't use energy intensity, energy productivity times wealth and population. And now, what do we know? We know that on that hand, we have to divide by 2 the world greenhouse gas emission. What we know that the world population will go from 6-7 billion to 9 million people by 2050. What about wealth? A minimum wealth development globally is a factor 2. There is a call for a factor 4 global GDP growth by the UN and the World Bank. So now I leave you to solve this equation. This is one solution. This is one solution, you see? And this translates into some effort both on energy efficiency, improving the productivity at minimum to a 2 to 3% per year everywhere in the world, and on top of that also going for the decarbonized energy sector through renewable energy. Pathway towards a 2-degree warming. The North country consumed 4 times per capita than any country in the South, and the global target compared to the average is to reduce that by half. So there is no choice that the rich world, the OECD, the Australia of the world, goes on this type of path, and we have to accept that. And working in developing countries, we also have to accept that they have to develop, but in a carbon-constrained economy. At best, we can accept that they peak their own emission a little bit later than the rich world, but they still have to abate their emission by 20% compared to today's low level of emission. And there's a difficult discussion today to decide the 2020 target. This is where the international debate on climate change is having the most difficult part. What do we agree on a target for 2020? And you very well know that the more time we spend to disagree and the the longest we wait for the peak, the steepest the slope to reduce these greenhouse gas emissions will be. And I don't know if you ever skied, but when you start skiing, you never start by the steepest slope. And this is what we are doing, because every year that goes, because we don't take decision, we are putting ourselves on this. So what we do at UNDP, we channel some international finance to help developing countries also recognize that they have to also mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. So most of the work we do is to channel some money from the Global Environment Facility. Li Tianan just presented one of the programs that UNDP has brought to the region of Asia, around China. And this is typical type of program I do. We also do carbon finance, a clean development mechanism. You know, a ton of greenhouse gas reduction in any developing country has become a commodity. And we work so hard in that field. And I can tell you that it's a total failure compared to what we were hoping. And definitely total failure to bring carbon finance to play a role to promote energy efficiency. But we've learned that it's not enough to put in place this complex, elaborated, sophisticated mechanism. We also have, more than ever, to build capacity, put in place a policy framework, and there is some interesting development for that. There are two interesting developments. The first development is the latest negotiation of the UNFCCC are now engaging the whole world, the whole countries, into mitigation. The Kyoto Protocol put a burden to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions only to some developing countries, to the developed world, okay, to the OECD plus some other countries. But now it's clear that the next round of negotiation can only agree that all countries do participate to mitigation. And the term of nationally appropriate mitigation action is the term that is being used to help countries develop their own strategy, recognize their own potential for mitigation, and design them. This is a voluntary approach for the time being, because there is no agreement, as you know, at the international level. But this is a very important step, so that each country takes into account its own potential and work for it. And my plea is that we don't forget energy efficiency. There is a risk that there is a whole focus on reforestation and so on. This is good. Renewable energy, and we need renewable energy. But sometimes I feel a bit nervous because this is where we need to see energy efficiency. And we may need your help, typically a crowd like yours, to make sure that we bring energy efficiency to the level of the debate that we know at the on this NAMA discussion and so on. There is a second interesting global context. 2012 has been declared as a UN Year of Sustainable Energy for All. How many of you have heard that 2012 was the Year of Sustainable Energy for All? Well, this is an interesting move, because there are maybe 35 different UN agencies. UNDP is the biggest one, but maybe 10 to 15 of them are dealing with either climate change or energy. And it took some years, but finally, Ban Ki-moon himself has been convinced that we are not going to solve the world of helping developing countries if we don't address energy seriously. It has been understood now that, in fact, energy is a lifeblood in any economy. If we don't pay attention, the difference between a developing country and a developed country is access to energy and the energy being consumed for each level of GDP and per capita. So energy transforms our life, our economies, our planet. But what's interesting, and this is why I'm sharing the information, is that this Sustainable Energy for All initiative will mobilize global action to support 3 interlinked objectives to be reached by 2030. And those are becoming UN official objectives. The first one is ensuring universal access to modern energy services. According to the IEA, today in this world, up to 2 billion people rely on biomass for their cooking needs, and 1.4 billion don't have access to any form of modern energy, electricity. If we, in a business-as-usual scenario, the IEA said by 2030 we'll still have above 1 billion people without access to modern energy, to any form of electricity, and we are not going to see development. So now there's a goal, a universal goal of bringing electricity to everyone by 2030. You see the challenge? Interestingly, there are two other objectives. Doubling the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency. Isn't that beautiful? And doubling the rate of renewable energy. And the last two objectives are meant to support the first objective of universal access to energy. So for the very first time, at the international level, energy is getting there. Not quite, but it's getting there. So between climate change and sustainable energy for all, there is a way forward. To start my conclusion, I see some opportunity for energy efficiency in developing countries. And much more needs to be done despite the interesting latest development, the interesting context I just mentioned. We need to remove subsidies on conventional energy everywhere, and this is a big hurdle to energy efficiency in most developing countries. Another element, issue that we have in developing countries, most of the urban population in developing countries will double by 2030. We are seeing now in many developing countries, in Latin America, Africa, Asia, a doubling of the urban population by 2030. We are building today, the infrastructure, the transport, and the networks that will consume energy, and we have a unique opportunity to influence. That is not yet fully taken into account. We need to embed energy efficiency in every bit of this decision related to transport, building, network. We have a unique opportunity, but this is not happening. You know, this is, I'm doing my best, but this is not yet happening. I heard some interesting discussion yesterday on PV and how we can adjust the PV to the grid. No, we should not adjust renewable energy to the grid. We should adjust the grid to renewable energy. And we can do that in developing countries where, you know, all this has to be put in place. And I'm saying that, but we don't do it, so we hopefully will. And of course, building codes. There is an interesting thing that I've not heard so far, or just a little bit yesterday, is this interesting synergism between adaptation and mitigation of climate change. If our buildings are more energy efficient, they'll be more resilient to heat wave, for instance. And we don't play enough of that, and I think we have something that we need to explore, beef up, and there are interesting. Take the issue of heat island effect, you know, big cities, you know, by planting trees and changing the albedo, and also not only we can mitigate greenhouse gas emission, but we'll just make the life more comfortable. And more of this should be done, and make sure that energy efficiency, it's one of these illustrations that Robert just showed, you know, there's many side, I don't know if you have adaptation in your, energy efficiency can also contribute to adaptation to mitigation. Okay, there is something very simple also we should decide together, collectively, is to phase out obsolete technology everywhere in the world, and not only in the rich world. Yes, it's good to phase out incandescent lamp because we can do it, the technology is there, but why don't we do that just globally? I don't understand this world where we spend a lot of advanced discussion on the very sophisticated, complex, like the carbon finance and CDM, and we don't even agree on let's phase out the most obsolete technology that we don't need. I wish the UN could understand that, and maybe you can help me. And this is where we need to see full harmonization and of regional standards and labels. This is a no-brainer, but we don't do it enough. We just saw an illustration that it is possible. More has to be done. And power outage is an extra complication of energy efficiency. Also, this is where we still have things to learn on how to promote energy efficiency. I can see that power outage. I work in Nigeria. And when I went through some meeting in Nigeria, and I couldn't understand what I was told. And I suddenly realized that in front of me, I had people who never, ever experienced 24 hours of electricity. So sometimes they don't use the off button. The TV is on, the light is on. If there is electricity, there is TV or there is light. And if there is no electricity, there is nothing. And, how do we promote energy efficiency? So this is an interesting challenge. Decentralized energy system, there is an opportunity for advanced energy efficiency. In conclusion, energy efficiency needs to be brought at the international climate change debate and communities. Not enough is being made at this level. Help me, please. I mentioned that 2012 was the UN Year of Sustainable Energy for All. Do you know that 2014-2024 has been announced the decade of sustainable energy for all, with maximum focus on access to energy, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. Important for you to know. In 2015, Paris will host the COP20 or COP21 to conclude the follow-up of the Kyoto Protocol. And this is our chance to bring energy efficiency at the very heart of the discussion that will be brought. The last message for me is working in developing countries, pushing energy efficiency. I've learned that the most important is that you continue to lead by example. We want to see Australia go further and go deeper in the implementation of energy efficiency. It's because you do it, it will be easier for us, the UN, and to bring that to the developing country. Thank you very much for your attention.
If I could ask all the speakers please to come up to for a panel discussion. I think we'll go a little over time if we need to, because I think we've got such great people to talk with. And Kateri, if you could please join us, if you would sit up the top while you're coming up. Chris has reminded me that I should remind you that at between 5 and 6 we've got an exciting thing for the Australian Alliance, where we're going to launch our effort to establish an Australian Collaborative Centre for Energy Efficiency and Decentralised Energy, EXCEED, and Chris will be leading the program this afternoon to explain what that's going to do and how it's going to work. So I hope you all come along and join us and participate in that. So, by the way, thank you for Benoit. I think you're going to be my new best friend. That was very entertaining, and also I think that you did a better job of explaining in simple terms the issues. I would like to keep you in Australia for about a month to go through a media circuit and also see all the politicians, because it's something we desperately need. I'd like to...
And then we get them for a month in the States.
I'd like to invite you to ask questions to open the discussion if you just go to the microphone on a first-come, first-served basis. And while you're doing that, I just want to ask Kateri, given the fact that you're just joining us for the morning, if there's anything you'd like to comment on from the speakers this morning, or any issues that you think we should raise in the discussion.
Great. Well, a couple of things. First of all, I want to compliment these gentlemen. It was incredible discussion. One thing that I hope that we can cover and talk about a little bit more is this notion of a rebound effect. And I liked the way that Robert put it, that it's not something we can be naive about, but how much should we be focusing on it, and are we even thinking about it the right way? So I'll give you an example of that. In the U.S., there's a business plan that Best Buy, which is a very large big box retailer in the U.S., was looking at a scheme working with utilities and with auto manufacturers to put in the raceways for charging electric vehicles in the home and going into the home and finding all of the ways to reduce electricity load in the home so that the homeowner, when they brought their electric vehicle into the garage, didn't see an increase in their bills. Okay, that's a rebound effect, right, guys? I mean, the typical thing. We're lowering energy use in one way and putting it in another. But think about the impacts of transitioning our transportation sector in the U.S. from oil over to electricity and the opportunities to use renewable and to move to cleaner sources. So I really would like us to talk a little bit more about that, because I don't think that as energy efficiency advocates we should have to go out and defend this notion of an energy efficiency rebound all the time. We're going to use more and more energy. We've heard that all morning. Let's talk about how we use it as wisely as we can and how we become more productive as a global economy. That's number one. The second thing I want to talk about, too, is chopping down bites of what has to be done and looking at what the investment is by countries. So the big spigots like the U.S. versus the small ones, because I think it gets a lot more doable. Those are two I want to cover.
Very good point. I think one of the things I liked about Benoit's presentation too is that just reminding us the scale of the issue and how everyone's got to pull their own weight. Because in Australia, I think there's a tendency in the discussion to say, "Oh, we are 2% of the world emissions. You know, we could do all this stuff, and it's not going to affect anybody." And just a missing of how big the scale of the job is right across every country. That everyone's got to play their own part.
And the states say the same thing. Even if we did it at 24% of energy use, we're not going to make a difference. It's crazy.
Would like to take the first question?
Hi, Nina Hall from CSIRO. Thank you for such an enlivening morning. Good way to wake up and start the debate. So my question's mostly for Robert and for Benoit. The efficient world scenario, it's very compelling, it's very exciting. But I wanted to ask, what are the big wedges that get us to that point? What are both the low-hanging fruit but also the biggest bang for our buck?
Shall I have a first crack at that? This relates a little bit to Shadow Minister Hunt's proposal yesterday to start funding cost-effective initiatives, and this is a seriously good idea. I think it's useful to recognise that we need something to stimulate market growth in these areas. That's good. But, you know, what's the right wedge? There's a lot of talk that buildings are the single biggest opportunity. Well, they are in the developed world, where our buildings are quite energy intensive and it's dominated by North American, Canadian, European cold climates, and there's a lot of heating going on in these buildings, and it has to. But the reality is where building stock will grow is in the developing world, and it's quite a different energy intensity feature going on there. But that's just looking at the petajoules in building energy demand. I suspect the biggest wedge and the one that's most critical to the world is actually transport. We have options for energy supply and stationary energy. We can do a whole bunch of things with buildings, even if they're inefficient and old and the rest of it. It takes time, money to do it, but we have some options. We don't have a lot of stuff that competes with a litre of diesel. And diesel is critical for trade, for freight, for transport, and it underpins economic activity. And so where is the biggest wedge? Well, it depends how you want to define the wedge. I suspect it's a more intricate wedge than just the scale of petajoules that we think we can save. I hope that answer is useful.
When I read the World Energy Outlook, the different scenario, and also the IEA energy technology perspective, it's clear that energy efficiency and the end use account for the biggest portion of the share. I don't have the number, but it's easy to, I think, up to 60% of the total, the reduction towards the low carbon path is to come from energy efficiency, combining end use and at the level of production. I also recall this 2007 IPCC report highlighting, where is biggest portion of greenhouse gas reduction, and building came number one. And at the end of the day, we may not need to travel or to be as mobile as we are, but we need to have a shelter, and it may be more important that we pay attention to that. And the beauty of buildings is that new buildings can be made carbon neutral everywhere in the world, and we have to organize this big move toward carbon neutrality of new building everywhere in the world by 2020. At the same time, we also have to promote energy efficiency in the existing stock, but not at the small scale. I don't want the 10%. No, we want the 10% plus the 15% and combining all that. And it is possible. We know how. So I tended to believe that the building sector and the way we organize the building with cities, this is where we have a huge margin of progress, and we can make things happen. And there is a lot of side benefits in doing so. And one of them is job creation and so on. And we, I would focus on building both residential, commercial, and but not forgetting the big chunk that is existing building. This is for the rich world, and for the developing countries, the minimum is to introduce those winning policy like building codes that don't exist yet.
Sure.
I want to be a bit heretical here. I think that the opportunity lies in engaging consumers in the developed world. It may be different in the developing world. But if you want to talk about what's going to make a difference, it's empowering people with information. If you are renting an apartment, if you're buying a home, and you demand that that home be energy efficient, trust me, folks, things will change. Consumers also lead businesses. So if they understand that there are savings to be gained, they hear about what Walmart is doing, what Dow is doing, and Dow talks to its employees about this, that can make a difference. And I just think we're not doing, their studies show that if you just empower a homeowner with information on their energy use, real-time information on their energy use, savings come about in the order of 10 to 15% because people will take action. So I think that if we want to capture low-hanging, high-hanging, mid-hanging fruit, we've got to reach out and talk to people and have them understand what the benefit is to them. We've done lots of studies at the Alliance to Save Energy, and people aren't motivated by climate change and doing the environmental right thing. And it goes to the point, they're one of, in the U.S., 364 million people. How can it make a difference? But if you talk to them about putting money in their pocket, about improving the quality of life for their children, about the health of their children and their community, they start taking action. And it's as simple as that. We don't have to be complicated. We have to teach people how they get more out of each unit of energy, how they improve the quality of their lives if they start using energy more wisely. And I think that's a critical key that not any of us spend enough time on.
Just before I take your question, how are we going to get the politicians and the public to a point of understanding the urgency to make really large bites into this issue, and that it's not just incremental steps that are required, and that the opportunity is also large, because the debate here, and I'm sure it's similar in the States, is maybe we'll make some small retrofits to buildings, and then we feel good that we've done something about energy efficiency, and that doesn't seem to line up with the urgency of the climate change issue or the size of the opportunity that's out there.
I'd like to go to that. I would venture to suggest that the investment that just about all governments make in energy efficiency is equivalent to the amount of money they spend on morning tea in the health sector. So, if you want to see large-scale investments by government to stimulate markets to develop energy efficiency, start hooking it into health and education. These are the two largest portfolios that governments manage around the world, or infrastructure. So how does energy efficiency contribute to reductions in infrastructure investment? It's got to be something that delivers to a multiplicity of priorities for governments rather than something that delivers some sort of technical thing that you can't kick at that ministers don't understand.
I have two comments on that. One, I agree with you completely. I think one of the reasons that we got traction with the President and the administration on our Energy 2030 plan, this notion of a state energy efficiency productivity race to the top in competition is something they did it in very well in the education sector, and it's going to be driven by and funding $200 million, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a huge amount in the budget cutting days that we're in the States. Putting that kind of money forward, they're doing it for economic improvement in the States, for infrastructure modernization, and all built around energy efficiency. So I think that is a key. The second thing I would say to you, though, is, John, I'm not sure that in all instances you have to talk about the magnitude and have it be overwhelming to people that they've got to make big changes, because energy efficiency is all about picking the pennies up, right? So I think if you start thinking about it and breaking it down into chunks, so if we're going to try to double energy productivity between now and 2030 or 2035, whatever the numbers are that are there, the investment in the U.S. For us to do that is about $164 billion a year, spent around a lot of people in a lot of different ways. So I think that we can make, and the impact of doing that, remember, as I said yesterday, is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. by 1/3 below 2005. So I think focusing on a portfolio of small actions and showing if we can do those, because they are doable, we have big impacts. So I think that's the key versus the urgency to act now. It's give people a roadmap and show them that by doing little things and playing their part, we get to that big ticket impact that we need.
Thanks. And I like the alliance to copy what you've done and set up our own commission and our own plan that we could promote before the upcoming election. I think that will help policymakers. Over to you.
Thank you. Sorry, Walter Reinhardt from Australian National University. Is this on?
Yep.
Okay. So my question is directed to Benoit, but the distinguished international panel could advise as well. Politics as they are in Australia, we may move away from a carbon price to a grant and direct funding from government for energy conservation, energy efficiency and renewable projects. Does the panel have any advice in terms of experience based on our experiences in the clean development mechanism in how for our sectors to succeed in this grant giving environment from government projects?
Oh, I don't.
I don't know what to answer. I don't know enough about the situation here in Australia. I believe that it's not understood enough what we're pushing here. The reality of climate change and what energy efficiency can deliver. There is such a huge need to reinforce, to build capacity at all levels, and the solution exists. We know the way forward. We know the technical solution. What's missing is, at the political level, the full understanding of the scope of the effort and to recognize that. And there is not one silver bullet. There is yes, we need a price. We need to remove subsidies. We need a price of carbon, and we need a whole series of policy and instrument to make things happen. What worries me is to make sure that what we design, the policy that we put in place, are in line with what we need, where we need to go. I don't want us to be pleased by the small step, and this is not an easy task. What can I say? When was that? At Davos last month. You remember Nicholas Stern, when his report in 2006, saying that the cost of addressing climate change has a price. Yes, there is a 1%, 2%, 3% cost to address climate change. But the cost of not addressing climate change is 10 times bigger than that. And in Davos last month, Stern was saying that he got it wrong. And the situation is much worse than what he planned. And we should pay attention to what those guys are saying. And this is part of we are denying the reality. We have to believe what we know, and a great deal of the solution can come just if we agree on what's at stake. It's a life of human beings, and there is no room for 7 billion people at the end of this century in a world warmed by 3-4 degrees Celsius. There is no room for 7 billion. We have to accept that, and the solution will come. We have to reinvent. But it's not a crisis, it's a profound mutation, transformation of society, of civilization. This is fascinating. This is in our hand. And we are part of it. We are part of the solution because of the good experience that we have on energy efficiency. But you see, I don't have a clear solution, okay?
But your comment I thought was brilliant.
Yeah.
Yes, hello. My name is Jeff Beale. I'm an electricity customer, but I'm also a retired electricity supply engineer, so I can speak with some authority about what's happening in the electricity industry. My question is really going to be directed mostly to Robert. I love the idea of refocusing the dollars that are going into electricity network investment and putting it into energy conservation and energy efficiency measures. My problem is, if I were to wear a hat as the CEO of an electricity utility, and knowing that if I don't make $1 billion investment in a couple of years, I'm going to breach reliability standards, breach voltage regulations, and a bunch of other things as well, that's my job. My problem is that energy efficiency and energy conservation measures are slow. Yep. And I have a wall right in front of me that I'm going to bang straight into. Yeah. So my question is, what can you do about that? Would you be prepared to temporarily relax some of those standards in order to get us past the hurdle?
Yeah, and you're dealing with 30-year asset lives, and you're often dealing with a 10-year consenting processing new line in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's reality. Okay, so let me paint a little bit of a story, okay? So a network company, distribution company, sort of says, we've got some interesting challenges about feeding power into the network we serve. If demand grows too high, we'll not only be increasing our own capacity, but at some stage our community will be facing the amortization costs of a vast new transmission line into the network. Correct. This can go on forever, you know. And they sort of say, well, yeah, how do we do what we should be doing? It really is trying to provide services at the least cost, access to electricity at the least cost for our customer base. And there are many ways to do this. I know an example of a company that sort of says it's our role to send the right price signals. We don't need to do the energy efficiency. We don't need to purchase and operate the standby generators, the peak loading devices. We don't actually need to build a lot of the network capacity. We just need to send price signals that get everyone else doing the right thing. Okay, this is a true story. It started 30 years ago. The network company is Orion. It serves Christchurch and the hinterland around Christchurch and South Island. So if you were a Christchurch industrial consumer in winter, you would face a peak demand charge of $120 per kVA connected demand. That's a pretty steep demand price signal. You would face that for 12 half hours during winter when the peaks were happening. They've basically suppressed the need for a $150 million transmission line into Christchurch, which would be about a $15 million a year impost on that community. For 30 years, they've avoided that additional line. Their own network investments have been moderated and managed. They've stimulated the community to set up a whole bunch of things, LPG heating, LPG alternatives. A lot of buildings in Christchurch, well, before the earthquake gave it a pretty tough time, ran on reverse cycle air conditioners with gas preheaters for frosty mornings. You know, it's just doing the right things to change behaviours. So, did this work? Okay, they have the lowest network charges of the entire country. So they've won on the one thing they had to get right for their community. They probably have the best network loading of the entire country because they had extraordinary winter peaks because of reliance of electric heating with no gas supply in the South Island. They've moderated their demand. They've got a much more profitable load profile. The peak is gone. It's flat and broad. So I think it's actually about, can you conceive a better way of doing business that delivers what you have to do and delivers what your customers need? And I think you can do it all with price, because there's a very good example of that happening.
But it's a timing issue.
Yep.
As a CEO,
Actually,
my job is on the line, right? If I don't
No,
make
We understand the issue. In fact, it's funny you mentioned that, Robert.
It takes time to do this.
We developed that design for the Orion, South Power, and then Orion. But I'll give you the counter argument, which is the argument that we gave 5 years ago to the AER at the last undertaking. We said at the time, what you are undertaking is a very, very high-risk strategy. The low-risk strategy is actually to do a combination of investment and demand management, get much closer to your customers, do much better load forecasting. And we argue that, in fact, the investment strategy that was being undertaken was grossly risky, because if there was any change in the load growth, which we thought was almost entirely likely because of all of the policies and economic change that was going on, that you would end up with stranded assets. And we argue that, and I think it was absolutely right, that the lowest risk strategy, in fact, was a combination of demand management, improved load forecasting, and with their investment strategy. They would have invested a lot less. They would have the investment that they made in demand management would have gone into the pockets of their consumers, which would have mitigated a lot of the price increases. I think it's just a fundamentally better financial strategy. That'd be my argument. And the example of
and maybe that encapsulates. It's actually a financial approach to asking what do we need to do, rather than an engineering approach to it. I'm sorry, I'm an engineer too, but that's the reality of it. It's actually asking what's an economic approach to getting this right, rather than an engineering one.
But if you breach your service standards, your job's on the line. Your job is on the line, and that's the problem.
I don't think South Power ever breached the service standard.
No, they didn't.
And the fact that they've got the lowest delivery costs of any other of the 40-odd utilities in the country is, I think, prime evidence that this really works.
Yeah, so the strategy works.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got to go into the next question.
Thank you all very much for your presentations. I'd like to direct my question to Kateri and then to the rest of you. In response to what you said yesterday, you were talking about energy productivity, and at times we see that term used as a trendy new label for energy efficiency. But I really see that what you and some of the other panellists were talking about is reconsidering the idea much more broadly in a much more sophisticated and systematic way. And I wanted your thoughts on how do we transition decision makers from a sort of technical approach to energy efficiency to a systematic, sophisticated and economically linked concept of energy productivity?
Thank you for the question. I think that's what we're trying to do in the U.S. right now. And I got up early this morning. If any of you have traveled internationally on these between the U.S. and here, it's hell on your body. So I was reading all the press, and we are really beginning, I think, to make a difference in the understanding. One of the headlines was one of the what they call trade rags inside D.C., one of the energy publications was energy efficiency is out, energy productivity is in. We always do in and outs at the beginning of the year in the U.S. But it was a discussion about energy productivity and about looking at energy as being embedded in everything in our economy, and that we have to find a way to be more productive if we're going to be globally competitive, if we're going to be more secure and energy secure. And so you're starting to see policymakers, I think, very quickly, because it's almost intuitive that it's a good thing to be productive, right? There's what's bad about being productive? And so to look at your energy system and say that you want it to be as productive as possible. You don't have to get into arguments about what's fueling that energy system and, should we do the Keystone Pipeline? Should we do offshore drilling? What are we going to do about fracking in the U.S.? You don't have to get to that point. You can engage people on the notion that however that system is framed and whatever it looks like going forward, making it as productive as possible is something good for the country from the perspective of any point of view. So I think that it's an opening of a door. And then you can get into discussions about, once you start talking about having your energy system be the most productive it can be, then you start talking about, well, what are the best fuels into that? And if we are productive, that can back out the use of other things. Natural gas, we're awash in it in the U.S. right now, and there's a big debate about whether we keep that hemmed in to only our country or we open export of it more broadly. Talking about energy productivity is a way to say, okay, well, we can use less of it here, and then decide. Are we going to build our economy more with it, or are we going to ship it outside the U.S., but it gets us into that conversation and it gets to that more sophisticated level.
I'd like to thank all the panellists for their fantastic contributions today. I certainly will go away with a few things that Benoit said stuck in my head. We have to believe what we know, I think, is something that I really loved. And maybe we've got to also get that simple message out so that a lot more people know as well. But thank you very much for all your contributions. They've been fantastic, and I hope you enjoyed it. And let's now have a break. And could you thank all the panellists, please?
You were great.